over here on the full kidney section, my right, your left, we can identify the cortex around the outside. We can identify the medulla in just internal that contains the renal pyramids. And we can identify the renal pelvis here that collects the urine and empties it out into the ureter, which is found right here. I like to do blood flow questions on this section. So renal artery enters in, branches to the segmental artery. What vessel do we see going between our pyramids? Interlobar. All right? And the lobar is going to connect through this arcuate artery that runs along the lateral border of the pyramid. The arcuate artery branches into which vessel? Out here. Interlobular. So be clear on the difference between lobar and lobular. Lobular is in the cortex. Lobar is in the medulla. They're spelled very similar, and if you have to spell them and you make a tiny little change, that can affect how many points you get. You can miss it completely. All right, so arterial supply is mostly what we're going to worry about. We're not going to worry so much about venous drainage there. Shifting over to this middle section, we look at the nephron. We can see between these two nephrons here, one is cortical, one is juxtamedullary. Juxtamedullary means closer to the medulla. So this side here, we see this long loop down into the medulla. This is the juxtamedullary. You might say, how do I know it's the medulla? Only the nephron loop is in the medulla. So this is medulla, this is cortex. All right? This side over here is further out into the cortex. The loop is shorter and just barely dips into the medulla. So we call this a cortical nephron. Identifying parts of the nephron. We see this little cherry, cranberry looking structure. That's the renal corpuscle. And the corpuscle drains fluid into our proximal convoluted tubule. That's this green tube. That drains into our nephron loop. The nephron loop empties up into our distal convoluted tubule. We see that right here. It's kind of tannish. That empties into a collecting tubule, which empties into a collecting duct. Number-wise, the collecting tubule is number 4 on here, and the collecting duct is number 5. You can say either or. They're so arbitrary because they're so close. I mean, I'm not going to be that technical. So if you say collecting tubule or collecting duct, I'll accept either. All right. Moving over to the blood supply in this area. We see this collection of capillaries that surrounds our nephron loop. What's that called? Vasa recta. That covers the nephron loop. It's in the medulla, so any capillary in the medulla has to be vasa recta. Up top, the capillaries surrounding the tubules are called what? Peritubular capillaries around the tubules. And so any of these capillaries in the cortex surround the tubules, so they are peritubular capillaries. Now we still see this is the arcuate artery because this is the medulla, this is the cortex. So going across there, we have the arcuate artery. This branch then would be that interlobular. Off of the interlobular, we branch to the afferent arterial. Right, so these little branches that go to the red ball here, those are afferent arterioles. These little red circles, they are the glomerulus. Each of these is a glomerulus represented. Okay. And then branching out of the glomerulus would be the efferent arteriole. So if we zoom in to take a look at one of these corpuscles, that's what we see over here on this side. So this whole thing is a renal corpuscle. The outer wall would then be our capsule. The inner webbing that looks kind of like a little mop is our glomerulus. This vessel that has kind of the cracked dirt appearance on its outer walls is the afferent arteriole. The cracked dirt is supposed to represent the granular cells of the juxtaglomerular apparatus. Okay. This other vessel right here is the efferent arteriole that's exiting out or pulling blood out of the glomerulus. Over here, this kind of weird shaped purple structure is meant to be the distal convoluted tubule. Why purple? I don't know. It's not very clear what it is. But I'm telling you it's the distal convoluted tubule, so remember that. So the cells surrounding the lumen of the distal convoluted tubule in this area are macula densa cells of the juxtaglomerular apparatus, telling us about salt concentrations at the tail end of our nephron. Okay? This structure here would be the first thing that accepts fluid from the glomerulus, so that would be our proximal convoluted tubule. And if I said, what's the fluid called in this region? You'd say filtrate. If I said, what's the fluid called in this region? You would say tubular fluid. All right, so there's a variety of different questions that can come from this model. That's why there will be two. All right, this one this will be the bulk of our urinary system component of the test. All right. Additionally, I will have what I would consider to be a much easier urinary system station